The Dallas Cowboys yesterday, Stephen Jones spoke at AT&T Stadium for the announcement of they're doing a bull riding PBR and Kid Rock event. They were out there speaking on that. But Stephen Jones had talked about Dak Prescott, the sexual assault case that's been brought up, the extortion lawsuit, how that affects things. They talked about a number of different things. But the biggest thing, and Chris, this is going to be cut 11, has Dak's cap number impacted what the Cowboys want to do in free agency?
No, the cap number, it's so overblown in a given moment because you have to look at a cap, what the situation's going to look like, not only this year but next year. When you have to, if you have to franchise because you're having a tough negotiation, not unlike we had with Dak 3 years ago. You've got to be able to account for all things. But no, I feel like we're able to cut and shoot. Dak's been willing to work with us. We've had great discussions about him and his contract. And he's all in on working with us, and we've had personal discussions with Dak as well. So,
what's interesting there is that Stephen Jones says we've had great discussions about him and about his contract. Because one of the things that's not been clear, and I think Jane Slater even reported this the other day, but they haven't had discussions yet about the contract itself. And that doesn't sound like they have. That sounds like, again, like Steven's using specific language where we've had great talks about him and about his contract and about what we want to do. And we've had great personal discussions with Dak. I think they've just talked generally. It does not sound like they've come to the negotiating table yet, which they don't have to in order to flip switches and do restructures and things like that. But this definitely sounds like they're in no rush to get anything done. And the possibility, at least, of just riding this out continues to grow. And if they let this thing ride out, then I think the probability grows to where you say Dak is not going to play ball with you if you let him ride out this whole contract. He will be gone if that's the case.
Would you want to have Jerry and Steven on today, or do you think it would just get really contentious? 9 a.m.
I don't think it would get contentious. I don't think it'd be like after the San Francisco game when we interviewed Jerry. I don't think it'd get that contentious. But I think that I think that Jerry would be. I think Jerry would be pretty even. I think Jerry feels confident about where they're at and what they want to do. But
how are you going to have right now be any different from last year? What do they think is going to be different? What's going to be an over-the-top thing? You had a second-place MVP quarterback season.
Yeah.
What's different? How much better are you going to get in that area? Okay, we're going to put it all on one game. He's going to have to play better in the first round, and then every other game after that. Like, you had a really, really nice season.
Well, the fair argument that's been made is that they'll say, well, it's not one game. It's you had the opportunity to play well against Green Bay, and you had the opportunity to play well against San Francisco in 22 and San Francisco in 21. You need to show that it's going to click. Dak needs to show it's going to click in those big games, in those big moments. He's got to play better. And if he's not going to do that, then to your point, how much better is it going to get than finishing second in the MVP? Like, how much better can he play? And so if they've got that, hey, you've got this, you're playing at this high level, how are you going to play in big games? That's all I need to see. I don't need to see anything else. And if you're not going to play well in big games, I'm not going to pay it. That may be how they're looking at it. But I still think they're playing a dangerous game here if they let this go too long. Are you a little more inclined? Because I know a couple weeks ago you thought, I think that's. You seem to express that you thought it was a little extreme to think they could just blow the whole thing up after this year.
Yeah.
Are you a little more inclined the more this goes on and the more they seem to just be willing to let everybody play on 1 year? Are you a little more inclined to believe they could blow it up if things go sideways?
They'll never blow it up because of Jerry's age and stubbornness. They will try to find a Dak replacement as good or better. That's what I mean. They'll never start over unless they fall into a top 10 quarterback pick with Jerry's age.
Here's a question for you, because this is what they have to weigh too. Let's say they let Dak play out the contract, he goes off. How long do you think, if you look over the next 8 years after next season, so 2025 through 2032, what would you put the percentage chance that they have a quarterback here during that window that's better than Dak played last year?
In what window?
In that 8 year window. Let's say 8 years after, as long as Dak's been in the league, 8 years. I think it's less than 50%.
that a quarterback matches his level, it's way less than 50%.
And so to me, it's a stupid gamble.
Yeah, but you have to look, there's certain people that I've worked with. Just don't say anything. There's certain people that I've worked with that are fine if we are a top 5, top 4 show. I look at those people as losers. Okay? That's a loser mentality. Kevin Higgins gave me. I don't know why Kevin's making a face. You're 1 or 2, not 4 or 5. One. Until you were 1 until this week. And if you're comfortable just sitting at 4 or 5, I don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
I don't want to work with you. And that is the mentality you're showing with this.
But no,
it is, let me finish. It is, okay, like we can get MVP level quarterback seasons. Choppy and Mike Bassick want to take that swing, and they'd rather fall to 10th place than middle around at 4th and 5th, which is where the Cowboys are. They'd rather fall to 10th place swinging for the 10% chance that you increase to elite special from where Dak is. And you are way too safe in this area that has not sniffed an NFC title game.
Here's what
you're being scared, and I'm being scared too. For all these numbnuts this week on social media that don't know, I'll remind you. I think they should give Dak $60 million. So I'm being scared as well because of the fear of the unknown. I'm just telling you, I do respect those that are like, yo, if we fall to 3-14, fine. But we know we have a dead-end road right now.
Here's just how I look at it.
I respect those people for having balls and stones. Now, they're not making the decisions up top, and they don't have anything to really lose from it, but that's the mindset to get someone else.
The odds are not great that you find somebody better than Dak. Like you just said that.
Right.
Are the odds better that you find somebody better than Dak in that window, or that Dak gets on a 3-game hot streak? Because they will always be competitive. They'll always be in playoff contention. So are the odds better that you find a quarterback better than Dak, or that Dak plays well enough in a 3-game stretch to get you to a Super Bowl?
I would personally say a 3-game stretch, the odds are better.
I would too. That's why I wouldn't make the move.
Yeah, but you have to acknowledge and not shoot down the narrative and the belief from the Mike Bassicks, from other people, that this guy is a playoff, I don't want to say choker. That's a strong word. But there are people who just believe he can't get it done. There's a mental hurdle. He's not big enough for those moments, that he will fall short, that there is, I think it's way too simplified to boil it down to, all right, well, we know he can't win a second-round playoff game, get rid of him. It's like one game. We're going to make all these major decisions off of one game, but that is the narrative out there on him, that he's a playoff choker.
And that's, he's got to overcome that. He has to change that narrative. That's on him. I would say this, though.
Like, do you think that Kirk Cousins, I know we fight about Cousins. Do you think the Minnesota Vikings were winning a title with Cousins?
No.
So then getting rid of him is the smart play in many people's minds. You can be good. You can be a playoff team. You can be 10-7. You can be 11-6. But you're not winning it, and that's how people feel. A lot of people feel about this.
But the way I view it is like, I as we've brought up many times on this show, Sean, I'm not in a house. I'm in an apartment. I want to get a house. It's a rough market out there.
That's why you're here, not sick today. You don't have a lawn to cut.
Exactly. I can avoid Movid. To me, I look at it like this. It's like if I were to say, I'm going to just take my rent payment then, in order to try and get a house, instead of working to try and save up the money or just continuing to work towards getting a house in my current situation, I'm going to take my rent payment and just spend it all on lottery tickets. Because if I can hit the lottery, then I'm going to be able to turn that lottery money into buying a house.
The lottery odds are much worse than finding an upgraded quarterback.
They are, but you're talking about taking a ridiculous chance where the odds are not as good as just continuing to try and make it work with what you have here. The odds are not as good that you're going to find somebody better. And that's where I just think that they run into some issues. Bill Walsh, good head coach, right? One of the better ones.
All-time great.
A decent head coach. The innovator of the West Coast offense, something that the Cowboys implemented in large part last year. So he wrote this book, Building a Champion, and I was looking at modern lessons that the Cowboys could potentially take from it. And do you know what the main takeaway from this book was for me? The main point that I was like, this is what Bill Walsh thinks is the most important thing to have on a championship team. Culture and process. Those are his two big checkpoints. This is one of the things that Bill Walsh wrote. He said, the culture precedes positive results. It doesn't get tacked on as an afterthought on your way to the victory stand. Champions behave like champions before they're champions. They have a winning standard of performance before they are winners. So he was very big in terms of the process and coaching up different things like, we hear the right kind of guy quote from Jason Garrett, that we want the right kind of guy, and we're like, this isn't Boy Scouts. That's not what you want here. Again, little bit
Choppy loved Jason Garrett for that.
Walsh leans into that. Bill Walsh had a similar thing. This is one of the things that he wrote. He said, great teams in business, in sports, or elsewhere have a conscience. At its best, an organization, your team, bespeaks values and a way of doing things that emanate from a source. That source is you, the leader. Thus, the dictates of your personal beliefs should ultimately become characteristics of your team. If I told you that was a Jason Garrett quote, wouldn't you believe that that was a Garrett quote? So that was one of the big hallmarks here. He obviously talks about different things that he wants in terms of innovation, the ability to adapt to different scheme changes that teams have, discipline, preparation, but the hallmark to him, he's like, this is the non-negotiable to become a championship team. To him, it was leadership and vision, team cohesion, and culture. And that's something that, while we don't feel like they have a cancerous culture like some of the narrative has been with the Cowboys, we don't feel like they get a big benefit from that. Yeah. And so Walsh would believe if Bill Walsh were around today and looking at this football team, there's a good chance that it sounds like Walsh would look at it and say, they're not going anywhere until they fix that, until they fix the culture, until they fix turning that into an advantage and true core values like the San Francisco 49ers. Remember, we read that piece from The Athletic a couple weeks ago where Lynch said that was the first thing they did when they got in there was create a vision, make sure everybody's on board with the vision, got to have these values in place. That sounds like Bill Walsh would look at that based on this book that I read and would say that is the biggest thing the Cowboys need to address before they do anything else in terms of their players.
What's the name of the book?
Building a Champion.
Was it really good?
Yeah, it was very good. Yeah, it was. I mean, a lot of it, people would obviously say it's 30 years old. How much are some of the innovations and stuff like that?
Culture never going to stop.
Culture's never going to change, and I think there's some really interesting lessons you can take from a guy who was one of the greatest head coaches in the history of the NFL.